Okay, let's talk about the book of Isaiah. It is an absolutely monumental work, full of soaring poetry and prophecy that has literally shaped world history for thousands of years. But underneath it all, there's a fascinating literary mystery. And it's a big one. For centuries, people have been asking, did one single prophetic genius write all 66 of these chapters? Or is this actually the work of multiple authors, writing across different generations? It's honestly one of literature's great unsolved cases. So, you know what? Let's play detective. We're going to dive in and investigate the clues, starting with the oldest physical evidence we have and see if we can get to the bottom of who really wrote the book of Isaiah. And our first stop takes us way back, more than 2,000 years back, to the earliest manuscripts of Isaiah that have ever been found. Now, what's really interesting is that our first clues don't actually come from Isaiah's own time. They come from documents written hundreds of years later. And these texts give us a fantastic window into how ancient readers, people living much closer to the events, actually understood the book. So, check this out. In the book of Ecclesiasticus, written around 18 BC, the author makes a direct connection. He links Isaiah, the historical prophet from the 8th century, with this theme of comfort. Now, why is that a big deal? Because that theme of comfort totally dominates the later chapters of the book, from chapter 40 onward. This is a huge early clue that ancient traditions saw the whole thing as one unified work. And that brings us to this incredible piece of physical evidence, the Great Isaiah Scroll. It's the oldest complete copy of the book we have. So when scholars first unrolled this 24-foot-long manuscript, they were looking very carefully for a break right between chapters 39 and 40. That's the exact spot where many modern scholars believe a new author takes over. And you know what they found? Nothing. Not a thing. The text just flows continuously, which is a massive piece of evidence that the ancient scribe who copied it saw it as one single unbroken story. Okay, so the physical evidence seems to point in one direction. But what about the text itself? Let's go looking for a different kind of clue, something like an author's unique signature, a verbal fingerprint, if you will. And you know what? We find one. It's this powerful, very distinctive title for God, the Holy One of Israel. Now, this phrase doesn't really pop up all that much in the rest of the Old Testament, but in the book of Isaiah, well, it's everywhere. Just look at this chart for a second. The phrase appears 12 times in the first section and 14 times in the second section. Now, compare that to the entire rest of the Old Testament, where it only shows up 5 times. This unique verbal trademark is spread almost perfectly across the whole book. That's a really compelling argument for a single, consistent, authorial voice. And it's not just that one phrase. There are other little stylistic quirks, like the expression, "the mouth of the Lord has spoken it," that you see in both halves. The author also has this really deep, specific knowledge of the trees and plants of Judea, not Babylon, where the second part is supposedly set. All these little details start to paint a picture of one writer, deeply rooted in one specific place and time. So, as you can see, the evidence for a single author is pretty compelling. Now, of course, the debate is far from over. Other very smart scholars point to shifts in style and historical context as evidence for multiple authors. But maybe, just maybe, the most important question isn't who wrote it, but how it was written. Because the authorship question is fascinating, for sure, but it's the sheer artistry of the book that gives it its timeless power. So let's do that. Let's shift our focus from the who to the how. Because to really truly get Isaiah, you have to understand that you're not just reading prophecy, you are reading some of the most masterful, complex poetry ever put to paper. And get this, it's not just Isaiah. An incredible 1/3, a full third of the entire Old Testament is actually written in poetic form. It's like the foundational literary language of the whole collection. And the engine that drives all of Hebrew poetry isn't rhyme or meter, not like in a Shakespearean sonnet. It's a literary device called parallelism. So what is parallelism? Well, think of it as rhyming ideas instead of rhyming words. The second line of a couplet intentionally relates to the first one. It might echo it, contrast it, or build upon it. This creates this incredible rhythm of thought that just hammers the meaning home. Let me show you what I'm talking about. You're going to see 3 main types over and over again. First, you've got synonymous parallelism, which is basically restating an idea. Then there's antithetic, where you contrast 2 ideas. And finally, synthetic, where the second line completes or builds on the first. All right, here's synonymous parallelism in action, straight from Isaiah chapter 1. Here the word becomes give ear to the teaching, Rulers of Sodom becomes people of Gomorrah. See that? Line B is saying the exact same thing as line A, just with different words. It's a way of making the command absolutely impossible to miss. It's repetition, but with real artistic flair. Next up is antithetic parallelism. Now, this example is actually from the book of Proverbs, but Isaiah uses this contrasting technique all the time to make his points crystal clear. A soft answer is the opposite of grievous words, and turns away wrath is the opposite of stir up anger. By setting up this sharp contrast, the poet makes the wisdom in that first line even more powerful and memorable. And finally, there's synthetic parallelism. This is where the second line completes the thought of the first. This one's from late in Isaiah, and you can almost feel the argument building. Line A makes a statement of fact, my hand has made all these things. And then line B draws the powerful conclusion, and therefore they all belong to me. It builds the case step by step, right there in the poetry. Now, all of this can build to this really beautiful, elegant form called a chiasm, which creates a kind of ABBA mirror structure. Check this out. The Sabbath, that's A, was made for man, that's B. Then it inverts, not man, B, for the Sabbath, A. See that perfect symmetry? It's an incredibly powerful literary device that forces you to just stop and admire the perfectly balanced idea. And this is the aha moment. Isaiah uses these intricate structures to embed his most important prophecies in a way that's almost impossible to forget. The structure is part of the message. So once you start to see these patterns, you really can't unsee them. It's like somebody just handed you a key to a secret room in the text. And understanding the how behind the poetry doesn't take away any of its power. If anything, it magnifies it. You start to realize that the prophecies in Isaiah aren't just random declarations. They are masterfully crafted literary works where every single line, every structure is designed to resonate through the ages. So in the end, whether Isaiah was one person or many, one thing is absolutely clear. They were master craftsmen. And recognizing that incredible skill, the careful poetic architecture behind the soaring prophecies, leaves us with one final question. How does seeing the intricate human artistry within a sacred text like this change its power and its meaning for us today?